Good morning, everybody, or should I say good afternoon at this point. This is your man, Joe Tusio, listening to 98.5 WWLP Aston. And man, it is good to be back on Newman Radio. I have a lot of stuff to get to today. As everybody knows, the NFL season is done. We are getting into the coaching hires, especially the Eagles with their hiring of Doug Peterson as their next head coach. But before I get to that, I have to get to something that I just got to get to. Because a few weeks back, a good friend of mine, Gary, who is one of the biggest Kansas City Chiefs fans that I know, made a bet with me around week 14 or 15 towards the playoffs. And we had a bet of who would win the NFC East. He had the Redskins winning it. I had the Eagles winning it. I thought the Eagles were going to come back and win some games, and just to see what would happen. But I did not think that the Redskins were going to be as hot as they were leading up into the playoffs. And man, was I wrong. So, I'm here to say that, Gary, for once, you were right. I bow down. For once, you were right, and I was wrong. Now that that's done with, I have a lot of stuff to get to, and the first thing I'm especially just going to get right on is the NFL hirings that we had this offseason or this playoff time. There were 6 or 7 new coaches that were hired, including the Dolphins, who hired Adam Gase, who was the Bears' offensive coordinator from this past year. And to me, he's a guy that fits their scheme very well. Ryan Tannehill is a guy that he's a young guy. Even though he's getting paid a lot of money, he's a guy that Adam Gase can kind of mold into what maybe Jay Cutler did this year, where the turnovers can be, reduced, and he can work with the wide receivers that he has, especially Devontae Parker coming back and being a key piece on that offense. And if Lamar Miller comes back, they can run a multiple back set like they did in Chicago this past year with Lamar Miller and Ajayi and whoever else they have. So I think Adam Gase is a great fit on that Dolphins team. And it's going to be exciting to see what he can do with that offense this year. Hugh Jackson to the Cleveland Browns was another big one. Hugh Jackson was a guy who, over the past few years, as the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals, he did a lot of good work. Andy Dalton maybe had his best year as a Cincinnati Bengal. A.J. Green had a great year. The running game was great. Their offense was very good, a very high-potent offense. And now we got to see what he does with the Browns. And as most fans know, the Browns' head coaching job maybe isn't the easiest job just because they don't have a bunch of superstars. They have good talent. They have good young talent. And especially considering they have a top 3 pick in this year's draft, maybe they address the quarterback spot for once and for all. Maybe they go with a Paxton Lynch. Maybe they go with a Jared Goff. It's going to be interesting to see how Hugh Jackson addresses those needs this year. The Titans promoted Mike Mularkey to the head coaching job. This is kind of an unknown for me. I'm not really huge on how well he's done over the past few years, but he's got some franchise pieces in Mariota at quarterback. They got some good offensive weapons, and their defense last year was pretty good, so I think Mike Mularkey can at least do a decent job with this team this year. The Bucs were another team that promoted from within. Dirk Cutter goes from offensive coordinator to head coach after Lovie Smith was let go of the head coaching job. This is a guy, again, he's a good offensive-minded coach. And he has maybe the offensive rookie of the year in Jameis Winston at quarterback. He's got a great running game and great weapons on the outside. And the defense is one of those defenses where they have a lot of key pieces, but they don't seem to be that top 10 yet. So it's going to be interesting to see how he maybe finds a defensive coordinator that can help out a lot, and he can just take care of the offensive side of the ball. The New York Giants, Eagles NFC East rival, also promoted Ben McAdoo from offensive coordinator to head coach. And this is a guy where I think it's a lot like Dirk Cutter and Mike Mularkey. It's one of those promotions where there weren't so many superstar options out there, but McAdoo did a good job with Odell Beckham and Eli Manning, that they thought he was a guy that created his own offensive scheme where it worked well. And if he keeps Spagnuolo in as defensive coordinator, and if he keeps the offense the way it is and just gets some more pieces on defense, if J.C. Pierre-Paul comes back, if they can secure the secondary up, I think that could be a good promotion for the New York Giants. Now, the last two are the most interesting ones. When Chip Kelly was let go of the head coaching job with the Eagles this year, everybody said, San Fran, San Fran, San Fran. That's the place he has to go. Colin Kaepernick's there. He wasn't fitting with the head coach that they had. And Chip Kelly was a guy that wanted Colin Kaepernick here, but now he doesn't have to give that up. He doesn't have to give up the first-round pick or the third-round pick or a player. He's got his read option quarterback there. Now, many people think that this is going to be a simple transition for Chip, that the offense is immediately just going to put up crazy numbers, that Colin Kaepernick's going to be an MVP type of player. And in some sense, I agree with that argument. But in another way, I kind of disagree. I think he has the quarterback that he wants, and that's very important. But one thing that people have to also remember is that Chip Kelly, in some way, needs a Chip Kelly guy. If Colin Kaepernick doesn't get the offense that he wants, and he kind of talks back or disagrees with Chip Kelly, is Chip Kelly going to be able to work with that? Is he going to be able to work with guys that maybe he didn't bring in? I mean, the first 2 years he was here with Andy Reid's guys, they won 10 games back-to-back. And that's pretty good. You know, he's got his quarterback now. This past year, the Niners lost a lot of key players on defense. They're going to need help. And with a top 5, top 10 pick that they have, maybe they can address a wide receiver need. Maybe they can get a key defensive player with that pick. But it's going to be, it's a very intriguing thing to consider because I don't see it being an 8-8 team. I don't see him being an 8-8, 9-7, middle of the pack team where they're good here and there. To me, it's either going to flop or it's going to be the best offense in the NFL. And if Colin Kaepernick can just use the skill set that he has and not try to throw the ball 45, 50 times, if he can use his speed, if Chip Kelly can run the offense the way that he was trying to use it in Philly, just maybe he can get that Oregon offense in the NFL. Because it wasn't working in Philly. Bradford wasn't his guy. DeMarco Murray wasn't the running back that he really needed. It seems that maybe this is the best fit for Chip Kelly. And this might be the last option if he doesn't go back to college. Everybody thought the Titans would have been his job. Marcus Mariota's in Tennessee. Chip Kelly needs to go there. He's going to work wonders there, and they're going to win a Super Bowl. Well, that didn't work out. He's in San Fran now. And who knows? Maybe, just for argument's sake, heck, maybe we're going to have a Niners-Chiefs Super Bowl one day. Andy Reid versus Chip Kelly. I think that'd be a pretty interesting Super Bowl to see, but we just have to see what happens here. And the last head coaching hire was Doug Peterson to your Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this is where, if you listen to my show in the fall, I tend to rant. I tend to get angry at certain things. I tend to get not really pissed off, but it just angers me because something like this is what I try to look at and why I try to analyze the way certain fans or certain individuals act. And this is for any fan base. This isn't just Eagles fans. This isn't just NFL fans. These are just fans in general. Doug Peterson coming in and his potential coaching staff of Frank Reich, the famed Bills quarterback, and you have Doug Peterson as head coach, Frank Reich as offensive coordinator, and Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator of this team, who I think would be a great hire. I think he's a great defensive-minded coach. When he was the Lions head coach, their defense was always pretty good. When he was with the Bills, they were really good. And he doesn't have to have that head coaching status. All the pressure not going to be on him. He can just use a defense that he's given and use the star players that he has, especially with a guy like especially a Fletcher Cox, who you can immediately put a defensive tackle and he'd be a star there. And one underrated possibility that I thought of was there's some rumors or rumblings, I don't know if this is true, that Mario Williams will soon not be with the Bills, that this may be his last year as a Bills player. To me, that would be a perfect signing for the Eagles. He's a guy that has the perfect skill set for a 4-3 defensive end, is a guy that he's a monstrous player. He's a Julius Peppers type of player, a guy that could play for 4 or 5 more years. You put him at that defensive end role next to Cox, and you're good to go. You are set, at least on one half of your defensive line. If you go back to a 4-3. Now, if you stick with a 3-4, then maybe you get Tamba Ali from the Chiefs. Maybe Doug Peterson brings him over. Who knows? But I think if you go to a 4-3, Mario Williams is definitely a guy that you might want to look at, or at least think about in the next coming weeks and months as free agency starts up soon. But see, here's what gets me angry. Here's what I love about sports and what I dislike about sports at the same time. The raw emotion that sports create is one of the best things. Sports bring people together. You could be from 2 different spectrums of the world. Rich, poor, whatever. If you're the fans of the same team, you can relate to that one thing. And that thing can bring you two together. And I've witnessed it firsthand. I'm going to a Flyers game, Flyers score, there's just random people giving me high fives, celebrating, acting like I'm one of their friends. Because it's a family setting, because you're there to root for the same common team. And it brings a family or friendship-like setting. And that's one of the great things about sports that I love. And that's why I love talking about it. That's why I love discussing it, researching it, debating it, arguing it, whatever you want to say. But at the same time, this is what I dislike about sports a lot. This is what sometimes angers me and why I do what I do, why I host this show, why I talk about sports. Because it's fun to debate sports, because sports allows people to give their own opinions. Math is 1 + 1 is 2. That's a fact. 1 + 1 is 2. But if you say this coach is not good, well, somebody could say that coach is good. Everybody has their own opinion, and that's what's great about it. And nobody is really wrong. But the bad thing that the one thing that is negative about the raw emotion of sports is that it leads to overreactions and unachievable expectations at some point. And what I mean is that people like to assume certain things based off of a past expectation that they maybe had, or just a feeling that they have because they thought one thing was going to happen and another thing did happen. And it just leads to a whirlwind of emotions that aren't positive. And I'm not saying all emotions have to be positive in the sports world, because they're not. And that's one thing that's great about it. It's raw emotion. It's real. You're not faking it. That's how you really feel. And when Doug Peterson was hired, many fans just explode with rage. Doug Peterson this, Doug Peterson that. He's not going to win us a Super Bowl. Why do they have to hire Andy Reid 2.0? He's going to be a bad coach. He doesn't know how to run an offense, this and that. I understand. If you're not happy with the hire, I get it. I'm not discrediting your opinion, because it's your opinion and you can have one. But why do you have to automatically assume that this guy doesn't know how to coach? This is his first year as a head coach. Let's go back 2 or 3 years when Chip Kelly was brought here. Many fans, Chip Kelly is going to be the savior. He's going to be the next Bill Belichick. He's going to lead us to 5 Super Bowls. Woohoo, we got the best coach available. Yeah, where's he at now? And the day that Andy Reid left and went to the Chiefs, many fans probably also thought, yeah, good luck, Chiefs. He's not going to do much there. Yeah, that's why he went to the playoffs. Everybody wants the shiny new toy. Everybody wants the new coach. Oh, Chip Kelly's out there. We got to have that. Why? Because the guy's ran a good offense because he was a college star. I mean, I get it. You're allowed to say that a guy's that you can sit there and say, I'm not happy about a coach being hired because he wasn't my first choice. But I'm going to give him hope. I have hope for this team still. And then there's the fans that say he's never going to win. We're going to win 3, 4, 5 games at max. And then we're going to get somebody else. And then somebody else. And then somebody else. Give the guy a chance. Give the guy a chance. And then what? Let's say we give him 1 year and he wins 12 games. Somehow they win 12 games. Their offense is top 10. Their defense is top 10. Eagles win the NFC East, go on to the playoffs, get a top 4 seed. Doug Peterson's up for potential head coach of the year. And I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying any of this is going to happen. But I'm giving a scenario out there. Let's say that just happens. Then what? You're going to hop back on the bandwagon? Oh, I was on it from day one. I knew it was going to be a great hire. I knew it. Man, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman know what they're doing. I was on it from day one. Oh, you mean you were on it from day one saying that he was going to be a bad coach? Because you gave him no hope? Because you didn't believe that this could actually work? I mean, I'm not saying that the guy's going to work wonders with this team. But the guy hasn't been a head coach yet. Give him a chance. If I told you 3 years back, the day that Chip Kelly came here, and I said, in 3 years' time, Chip Kelly will not be the head coach of this team. He is going to be fired from his job, or he's going to part ways from this job. He's going to go somewhere else, and the Eagles are going to bring in a new head coach in less than 3 years. Joe, that's not going to happen. That's definitely not going to happen. I don't know why you're saying that. Chip Kelly's the guy. Yeah, and now look. There were probably plenty of coaches in the past that many people said, why was he hired? When Joe Philbin took the Dolphins job 2 or 3 years back, everybody said, he worked wonders with Aaron Rodgers. Look what he did. Yeah, now he's somewhere else. When Bill Belichick came from the Browns, if I told Patriots fans, this guy is going to be one of the best coaches of all time, he's going to lead you to multiple Super Bowls, they would probably look at me like I was on something. Like I was losing my mind. That's what you have to look at. You got to give the guy a chance. He's bringing in an offensive and a defensive staff that might be able to do something. When Peterson was with the Chiefs, yeah, their pass game wasn't that good. But their run game was top half in the league the last 2 or 3 years. And they were scoring points. This wasn't a team that put up 10, 15 points every single. They were putting up 25 to 30 points. With a pass game that was probably bottom 10 in the league. Give him a chance. You bring in Frank Reich, who was with the Chargers the past few years, whose pass game was top 10, top 12 in the league. You pair that with a Peterson, whose run game was top half in the league. Maybe you can make something work here. And the turnovers when Peterson was with the Chiefs was one of the best turnover ratios in the league. They were at one point the best team in turnovers. They only had like 15 turnovers at one point in 1 year. That's incredible. Oh, but I forgot. He doesn't know how to coach. I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm talking about. You're right. He's going to win 0 games and he's going to be fired after 1 year. And I may be wrong. He may be a bad coach. He may not win 5 games. But there are individuals, players, coaches, media personnel out there that like him, that say he knows what he's doing. I get it if you're upset about the hiring. I know he may not be your option number 1 or number 2. But give the guy a chance. And this brings me to another point that everybody says Sean McDermott was the guy. Sean McDermott needed to interview here. Look what he did with the Carolina Panthers. He would come here and he would come here and be a top 10 coach in the league. I just know it. Really? How do you just know it? How is this guy worlds better than somebody else? How is Doug Peterson an average guy at best, but Sean McDermott is the next, Ron Rivera, the next Pete Carroll? He's a guy that's going to turn a defense into top 5. Like that. Don't worry about what the talent is. He'll just do it. Because that's the type of coach he is. Give the guy a chance. Who knows? I may be 100% wrong. And I'm not declaring that I'm right on everything. But it just angers me when people don't use logical sense to make thoughts about something that they love. I love what I do right now. That's why I'm doing it. If I didn't love what I'm doing, guess what? I wouldn't be in the studio talking. But I love doing this. And it's funny when, you don't know what you're talking about. I've been around for 59 years. I understand. I understand. You've seen more football than me. You've seen life than me. I understand that. But when it comes to watching sports, it's not hard to just look at what's right in front of your face and say, do you know what? This guy might have a chance. This guy might have a chance. Who knows? You got to give it time. It's all about time. Yeah, I don't expect the Eagles to win a Super Bowl in year 1, and I don't expect them to win 3 games in year 1. But 3 years down the road, this team might be one of the best teams in the NFL. They might draft a quarterback that Doug Peterson molds into a great player, and the talent that they already have maybe works with his scheme, and he runs a traditional I-formation offense where DeMarco Murray can thrive, and they get a healthier offensive line, and the defense goes back to playing smash-mouth football. Who knows? And one of the things that leads into this is the expectations that certain people have. In this past year, the Eagles in the preseason were seen as being the red-hot team. This was the team that was going to win a Super Bowl, racking up 30, 40 points in preseason. They lose 2 or 3 straight games in the beginning of the year. They're the worst team. They're the worst team. I know from day one. Because it's the over-expectations. It's the overreactions. It's preseason. Nobody game plans for preseason. There are teams that can go 4-0 and win 3 games. I've seen teams win 1 preseason game and then go on and win 12 in the regular season. Who knows? And I think the expectations that people have for this year is why people are so worried about this year coming up. People thought Super Bowl or playoffs. This was going to be Chip Kelly's year. And it kind of flopped. Fans are mad. Now they hire a coach that maybe wasn't their first option. And it kind of builds up. And I'm understanding of that. I've witnessed it. I know. I understand that you're upset. But just use logical thoughts when making points about a guy that nobody really knows about at this point. If he was a head coach for some other team and he won 3 games every year, then okay. You might have a good point about why you may not like him. But just open your mind up to the potential of what this could be. The point of being a fan is liking your team through thick and thin, through ups and downs, through wins and losses. If you don't like your team because they're not winning 13 games every single year, well, then that's you. I don't know. But you got to give it hope. You got to give it time. Now, with the impending hiring of Doug Peterson as next Eagles head coach, and with the potential hirings of Frank Reich as the offensive coordinator and Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator, I'm just going to go through maybe some free agents or some draft picks that maybe could improve this team based off of what the potential schemes might be. Jim Schwartz, I think, ran a 4-3 majority of the time. Might have run a little bit of 3-4, but I think he ran a 4-3. And one of the key free agents that I was talking about earlier, or the potential free agent, is Mario Williams from the Bills. Now, Mario Williams is a traditional 4-3 defensive end. Is a guy that has 6'4", 260-pound size, is a guy that has strength, that has speed, that was a Pro Bowl type player that fits your traditional 4-3. He isn't a guy that can play a 3-4 and play in multiple schemes. You put him at a defensive end, you let him play with his hand in the dirt, and let him rush the quarterback. Period. That's all he's got to do, and he's very good at it. He is an elite talent when it comes to playing that position in the NFL. Now, one of the key free agents that especially affects the Eagles is Sam Bradford. Now, why this is going to be a topic of discussion for the next few weeks and months is that who Doug Peterson wants? Does he want Sam Bradford? Does he want to continue to mold a quarterback that for the last 4 or 5 games of the regular season, he looked very comfortable. He looked like he could command the offense. It looked like he was getting healthier every single week. Even though wide receivers, run game, and the offensive line maybe wasn't holding up too well. But he was making the best of what he had. And one of the reasons why this is going to be a hot topic is because of the amount of money he could potentially be getting paid. This isn't a guy that's going to get you $9 million a year. He's at the most expensive position, arguably, in the NFL. And is it a thing where you want to pay him $20+ million for a franchise tag? Or do you want to take the risk of signing him long term and hoping that he's the quarterback that you think he can be? And I think the draft as well plays into effect of, do you re-sign a guy like this? Because the top 3 quarterbacks, to me, seem like they're Jared Goff, Paxton Lynch, and Carson Wentz, who was a guy that beginning of the year many people didn't really know. Now he is on the scene. He's an up-and-coming player from a small school that has all the talent to be a top-level quarterback. And maybe if you played it at a Alabama or an SEC or a Pac-10 school, maybe he would be in that conversation of being the top 5, top 10 pick. But the draft is going to hinge on if they keep him. And even though free agency starts first, I think if Doug Peterson goes into this saying, I like X as my quarterback, he's a star college player, I think he has potential to be an elite talent 5 years down the road, Sam Bradford's probably not your guy then. And I don't think people want to watch Mark Sanchez or another guy for 1 year, especially if they want to rebuild and make the playoffs in a year or two. Because everybody wants Deshaun Watson at this point, who's a budding young star, a guy who's going to be in college for another year. And I don't think people want to see a slumping team for 1 year. This is going to be a team that you might have to retool. I don't know if you're necessarily going to have to rebuild, because I think you have a lot of key pieces on the team that can win. I think you just need a few more pieces, maybe at offensive line, at secondary, shore up the linebacker spot, and get a great wide receiver to complement Jordan Matthews and Aguilar. But the quarterback is what this whole team is going to hinge on. And if you keep Sam Bradford, you have to shore up every other position for him. If you give him a bad offensive line, sorry, I don't know if he's going to last. I don't think he can last 16 games if you give him a bad offensive line. I think Jason Peters can come back maybe for 1 more year, give it all he's got. If he can stay healthy and on the field, which is going to be a key factor. And I think if they run a traditional offense where DeMarco Murray gets his 3 or 4 yards behind the quarterback to find the holes and run right up the middle, maybe this can work out with Sammy B. It's going to be tough to see if they think he's the guy, though. And are you willing to sign him to 5 years at $80+ million? I don't know. I don't know if he's worth that. I think if you get Sam Bradford from like weeks 14 to 17, he's probably worth somewhere $60, $70, $80 million. But if you get Sam Bradford that was in the first half of the year, no. You got to go with a second-round quarterback or a first-round guy or sign somebody else. But in this year free agency, you're going to have a lot of stars that they're probably not going to make it to free agency at all. Von Miller is probably the biggest name. I don't see him leaving the Broncos. He's probably the best outside linebacker right now in the league. I think the Broncos will... Now, this is a team that is cap strapped. They're going to have they're going to have some needs that they have to fill, and they can't sign everybody. But I think Von Miller is the guy that they're going to have to sign. and he's going to get a big payday. And Ndamukong Suh got $100+ million last year. He's probably going to get something similar to that. You got some other big name ones. Muhammad Wilkerson from the Jets is another guy who unfortunately suffered a pretty bad injury towards the end of the year. That's probably going to affect the money that he makes or potentially can make. You got Jason Pierre-Paul, a guy who I still think has a lot of talent. He's not that old. I think he has 7-8 good years left in him. But you have to also, when it comes to that, look at the expectation that he's not going to be the guy that he was 2 or 3 years back. But he's still a guy that you could sign for 4 or 5 years, and he's going to be an impact player on that team. Because even if he doesn't get you 15, 20 sacks, the team is going to game plan for him, regardless if he puts up the numbers or not. And then you have some other guys that maybe they're not big names in terms of their star quality, but they're very good players. Eric Weddle is a guy that many fans probably know. The man's got maybe the best beard in the NFL at this point. He's at a position where he plays a safety, but he's getting up there in age, and he's getting paid pretty good money. I don't know if a team's going to give him maybe the money that he wants. I think he still has a lot left in the tank, but it's all going to depend on, is he going to go to a team that is rebuilding, or is he going to go to a playoff contending team? I think if he goes to a Miami Dolphins or a New York Jet team, maybe that could work. But if I don't see him going to like a Browns or a Jaguars or Titans at this point. Matt Forte is another guy where he's hitting that quote-unquote NFL 30-year-old mark, where at 30, this is where running backs supposedly start to decline. I don't see that happening for Matt Forte. I think he's going to last another 3 or 4 years. Is he going to get a big contract in Chicago? I don't know. I think with the running back committee that they have there with Langford and Carey right now, I think they're leaning towards the young guys and giving them time to develop to become the starters that they can be. But if Matt Forte will give them a discount and come on a cap-friendly deal, he might come back. But if he wants $8 to $10 million a year, I don't think Chicago will settle for that. I think maybe he takes one more run at a playoff, one more year getting a Super Bowl. Maybe he goes to Denver or New England or, Seattle. If Marshawn Lynch is not there, which he may not be, and that's another guy that you got to keep your eye on, is that Marshawn Lynch is a guy that he's going to go to a lot of teams. A lot of teams are going to look at him. And some teams that even have a running back may look at him still. But it's going to be interesting to see who he goes to. Back to what the Eagles need. I mean, they have a lot of needs. Russell Okung from Seattle is a great left tackle. Is a guy that protects one of the best quarterbacks right now in Russell Wilson. I don't think he leaves unless they think they have a backup tackle that could take his spot. I think he'll probably stay in Seattle at this point. And a lot of it's going to depend on the position or the schemes that the Eagles run. Anquan Bolden is an interesting option at wide receiver. This is a guy that he's got probably 2 or 3 good years left in him. I think Eagles can get him on a cap-friendly deal for 2 or 3 years. Let him work with the young guys, train them, develop, give him a mentor-type role. I think he could work wonders with that team. One of the big-name wide receivers that his name's on free agency, but I don't know if he leaves, is Alshon Jeffrey. Now, this is very interesting spot here because Alshon Jeffrey doesn't seem to be a lock to go back to Chicago, but it's a slim chance he leaves. Now, if a team like Philly were to offer him something like Des Bryant or something like that if somebody offers him like $70 million, that's tough to pass up on. I think Chicago will probably match it because they have a ton of cap space this year. But it all depends on if he wants to go back to Chicago. It all depends on if Kevin White comes back and can play up to the potential that he has. But I don't see him leaving. And this is one of these free agency years where you're going to see a lot of big names, but I don't know if they leave. Von Miller, Muhammad Wilkerson, Alshon Jeffrey are guys that I don't see really leaving, but their names are definitely going to come up in the offseason. Now, there are a couple more names here that strike interest, especially on the position that they play. Why don't you look at an NFC East rival and look at Justin Tuck? Guy plays defensive end, is a mentor type role. He's getting up there in age. You give him a 2 or 3 year deal. Let him coach up a Vinny Curry. Let him coach up Mario Williams if you bring him to Philly. If you play a 4-3, but that's the thing. If you play a 3-4, I think Tamba Hali would be a great guy to sign to this team. The guy's from Kansas City. Doug Peterson's coming from Kansas City. Maybe the Eagles give him money. The guy still got probably 3 or 4 good years left in him. He's 32 right now. He could probably play for another 3 or 4 years. And one of the interesting things when I looked down the list of the free agents in this year was that some people were saying Chase Daniels from the Chiefs, their backup quarterback, he could be the guy. If you think about it, he's an interesting name. This was a guy that was always seen as being like that. He could be a starter if they give him time. I thought he was a lot younger than he actually is. I thought he was about 25, 26. He's almost going to be 30 at that point. So if you think you got something in him, you got to get him now and start him now. You can't sit him for 3 more years and say, hey, we can put this guy in because he's got the talent. He did it with Kansas City as a backup. He can do it here and start. No. You got to, if you think he has talent, you got to put him in now. Period. There's this free agency class is a lot top heavy because you have a lot of stars up top, and then you kind of have some guys down low that don't make a lot of money, but are just really talented players. Walter Thurman is another guy. Is Philly going to re-sign him? Because if you don't re-sign him, you got to fix the safety spot then. Because he was a phenomenal safety this year. Phenomenal. And if you can't re-sign him, you got to look somewhere else then. I don't know if Eric Weddle can take that spot. I know that Tashad Gibson from the Browns, I think, is up on his contract. Maybe you look at him. But it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles address their needs. Especially if they look at free agency or the draft. Because there are some teams, the Broncos did it a few years back, the Bucs did it a few years back, where they threw money at free agents. They try to put together, quote-unquote, the Eagles fans know this quote well, they've tried to put together a quote-unquote dream team, and it hasn't worked out. The Broncos, so far, they've worked pretty well for them, but the Eagles and for the Buccaneers, it didn't work out so well. I don't know if the Eagles are going to try to throw money at players. I don't know if they go to an Eric Weddle or Von Miller or Muhammad Wilkerson or Jason Pierre-Paul and say, hey, we'll give you twice the amount of what your current team wants. I don't think Doug Peterson's going to do that. I think this might be a thing where they sign smaller free agents that can fill starting spots and then go into the draft and then draft their key needs. And so, moving on from the free agency side of it, the draft, this is going to be an important draft for what the Eagles want. Because this draft has a lot of good talent in it. It's sort of like last year's draft. You got a lot of good talent on this team. Not all of it's going to be in the top 10. Going to get guys. I mean, I think the top 5 talent is very good in this year's draft. I think Laramie Tunsil from Ole Miss is going to be a great tackle. I think Joey Bosa is going to be a great defensive end. I think Goff has what it takes to be a franchise quarterback. I think Paxton Lynch has the size and the skill set to be a great quarterback. I don't know if necessarily he's going to be that day one. Much like Goff, I think they're going to need time to maybe sit a year or two to develop their skill set. But I think at the skill positions, at wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, even in the secondary, especially this year, I think you got a lot of talent. And it's going to be interesting to see because each position has a different kind of ranking in this year's draft. And it kind of works that way a lot. Like, you'll have an offensive lineman go top 3, and then like 10 to 12, and then later in the first round. And I think that's how it's going to be this way. I think Tunsil's going to go top 2. I think Ronnie Stanley from Notre Dame is going to go probably in the 10 to 12 range. Taylor Decker from Ohio State is another guy where I think he has really good talent. He's going to go in the 15 to 20 range. Wink, wink, Eagles. Maybe this is where you might start looking at the offensive tackle spot because Ronnie Stanley could fall or he could be bumped up to the top 5. It all depends on, because I think free agency is going to be a year where there's not a lot of great offensive linemen. A few years back, there was a lot of great offensive tackles, a lot of great offensive. This year, you got maybe 1 or 2 tackles and 2 or 3 guards. So you might have to look offensive line in the draft. Now, the Eagles right now especially are going to need the interior of the offensive line. So I don't think they addressed the guard spot in the first round. Now, they gave up the second round with the Foles trade. So you kind of have to, you might have to wheel and deal here. You might have to give up a player to get a pick. Maybe DeMarco Murray is going to be your guy that you're going to run 300 times this year. Maybe Ryan Matthews can be put in a trade. You trade him and your 6th round pick, you get a 4th round pick or whatever. And the Eagles have a decent amount of picks in this year's draft. But there's just a few players that stick out to me of what the Eagles could look at. Laquan Treadwell, to me, might be number 1. He might be like the number 1 prospect on my Eagles board. I think he's got a great skill set. I think he's sort of like Alshon Jeffrey at this point. He doesn't have elite speed, but he's got tremendous hands. He's got great size. He's done it in a conference that is great. It's not like he went up against some no-name schools. He went up against really good teams. And he's not on a team that has a quarterback that's like an Andrew Luck or like a Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota. Their quarterback's good, but he's not going to be a first-round pick. At least not that I know of. So I think he's got to be top on your list. I think Taylor Decker from Ohio State's got to be top on their list. He's a great offensive tackle at this point. I think Stanley, Tunsil go in the top 10. I don't think they're going to be there unless somehow they fall, but I doubt that. I think Decker's going to be number 1 on your tackle board. I think in secondary, you're going to have a few corners and maybe 1 safety go in the top 10. I think a Mackenzie Alexander from Clemson is a guy that he could be a top 5 or he could go at 25. Marcus Peters was the same way. Marcus Peters in last year's draft was a top 5 talent. He went in the 20s, I think, to the Chiefs. And now he's a Pro Bowl player. Maybe that's what the Eagles find in this year's draft. Vernon Hargreaves from Florida is another guy where his talent level is top 5, but his size diminishes that. For just playing cornerback-wise, he might be the best cornerback skill set-wise, but he's shorter than most teams will probably look at. So that's why he falls. So maybe if you address offensive line in the free agency or in the 3rd round or 4th round, if you get Vernon Hargreaves, you could put him immediately beside Byron Maxwell. Maybe it works out. But that's also, and see, that's the whole thing. It depends on the talent that you have on the Eagles. If you think that your cornerbacks and your safeties, if you think Eric Rowe is going to step in next year and be the number 2 cornerback day 1 and be a star, then maybe you don't need to address that. But I think you need to go wide receiver, offensive line. If you go to a 4-3, you might need to look at defensive ends. I think Curry right now is a good defensive end on this team. He plays whenever he's in the game. He gets sacks, hits, pressures all the time. So I think if you put him in a permanent 4-3 defensive end role, he's going to be a star. But I think you need to rotate out and get maybe another defensive end. I think maybe like Shalik Calhoun from Michigan State was a guy this guy was a year or 2 back, he could have been a top 10 pick. Now he might fall into the 2nd round. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles address these needs going into the offseason if the coaching staff is the way it's going to look. But I think from hockey, basketball standpoint, the future in the next 2-3 years is going to be very good. And I think football is the one huge question mark. Can Doug Peterson be the guy? Can he be a guy that can at least build something here? I'm not expecting him to win us a Super Bowl, guys. I'm not expecting the Eagles to go out and win 14 games in his first year. But we got to wait and see. Because at the end of the day, that's what being a real fan is about. You got to give it time. You got to wait and see. You got to root for your team through thick and thin. And if you give it time, who knows? I mean, I think the coaches that he hired right now are also huge question marks. I know Tom Coughlin would have been a great hire because he's a guy that has the experience of winning a Super Bowl, and he can bring that leadership that the Eagles need. But they went with a guy that Andy Reid is comfortable advocating as being a great potential head coach for this team. He brings in an unknown staff that they're either going to win a lot or lose a lot, or they're going to be right in the middle. But it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds in the next few weeks, in the coming months, when free agency and the draft starts. My favorite time of year. And then after that, it's all unknown. We just have to wait and see what happens. It was a great first show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and hearing my rant today. I will be back Thursday, same time, 11 a.m. Listen to 98.5 WNUW LP Aston.